I'll be honest with you guys, I am not much of a reader, but I've been trying to get into reading and I set a goal for myself this year to read 10 books. It is currently November 14th and I'm on book number 9, so I'm on track there. It's gonna be close. But today I just wanted to talk about a recent book that I just read called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. Throughout the past 4 years, ever since COVID really, I've been on a journey to find out who I am and who I want to be. While reading this book, not only did it give me a few answers, but it also reframed the way I think about life. Although I don't entirely agree on everything that's said in this book, I would definitely recommend it for anyone who's looking for some direction. And by the way, this video is not a summary video. Mark Manson actually has a YouTube channel which you could go check out, and he has a summary of the entire book. So go check that out if you're looking for a summary. Today, I just wanted to talk about some of the more impactful quotes/statements that I took away from this book. Who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. If you haven't read this book or you don't know what it's about, it's essentially a book about values. And the big question that is asked in this book is, what do you care about? Or in Mark's terms, what do you give a about? Before I read this book, I felt like a lot of my values were linked towards certain goals. Like if I valued my health, then my goal should be to go to the gym. But what I want to do is oftentimes different than what I'm willing to struggle for. Mark Manson uses the story of him trying to become a rock star. Essentially, he wanted to be a rock star when he was a kid, but he was never willing to put in the practice. So essentially, he didn't actually want to become a rock star that much. Yes, he liked the lifestyle, he liked the image, but personally, he didn't want to do it because he wasn't willing to struggle for it. I kind of realized that in my life. Yes, I want to have lots of money and a house and luxury cars, let's say. And I realized that I don't actually want those things. Yes, it sounds good, but personally, like the struggle it takes to get there isn't worth it to me. And so that's kind of like how I've reframed my value system, is asking myself, what is worth it to me? The harder we try to feel better, the less satisfied we become. In the book, Mark Manson introduces a concept called the backwards law by Alan Watts, which is the idea that the harder we pursue feeling good all the time, the less satisfied we become, because the pursuit of something reinforces the fact that we don't have it. Most of my dreams or the things that I chase, the goal at the end of the day is happiness. When I reach this goal, I'll be happy. But I don't realize how much dissatisfaction that it actually brings me. I think this is just also interesting because it kind of contradicts the hustle culture that we have. There's this whole movement of people trying to chase money, chase success, chase like just material goods, and try to live a lifestyle that you see online and everything else. But the pursuit of that actually brings a lot of downside to your life because it's actually impossible to live like these people that you see online. It's not that it's impossible, but it's not as glamorous as you think it is. Something that I also found interesting is that self-reinforcement isn't actually a good thing. In the book, Mark Manson says, a person that is actually doing okay doesn't need to tell themselves in the mirror every morning. Honestly, I don't 100% agree with that. I think positive reinforcement is definitely helpful, but I've never looked at it in that way. The more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid it. This statement is actually something Mark Manson made up himself. He calls it the Manson's Law of Avoidance. In the book, he says, this is why people are afraid of success and why they fear failure, because it threatens who they see themselves as. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that's a pretty hard-hitting statement. And as I thought more on it, I kind of find myself agreeing, but not entirely. I think avoidance is more like a fight or flight response. If something threatens me, then I'm not gonna avoid it entirely. Sometimes I wanna attack it. But either way, I realized that this quote is kind of much deeper than that. After I read this quote and kind of thought more on it, I did a lot of thinking about what kind of person do I see myself as. I think everyone has a certain amount of ego. We believe we are something or we are someone. But I noticed that the anxiety that I get or the fear about the future that I get, like for example, not being able to afford a house in the future, is more than just that fact. It kind of threatens my identity. I see myself as someone who is secure, let's say, who has some shit figured out at least. But not being able to afford a house kind of threatens that identity of security. It threatens the idea of myself, of who I see myself as, which is why I'm so afraid of that fact. Mark essentially says the only way to get over that fact is to kill yourself. But he's not saying that physically, he's saying that mentally. Kill your ego. Let go of the idea of who you are and redefine yourself as more mundane things that you can control, like as a student, as a mentor, as a friend. Being average is the new standard of failure. I thought this was one of the more interesting statements that he has. I'm not sure where this connotation of being average comes from, but I definitely feel like it's true, and at least from my experience. I think we all have pretty high standards for ourselves, and it's really easy to compare yourself to others. I know we've heard it a million times, but I realized that social media is actually one of the biggest things that impact your value system and how you compare yourself to others. And I'm sure you heard this a million times, but people post the best things, and that's what you see on Instagram and all these social media platforms. I mean, like, even in the vlogs that I post, that's like 2% of my life. 98% of the time, I'm doing mundane things. I don't go out all the time and do things. I'm at home. I think we forget that being average is actually a normal thing. Being average is not something that you should be sad about. Even in my exams, like if I got the average score, then I would be happy. And what's wrong with that in life? In the book, Mark Manson says, people fear mediocrity because they believe that if they accept it, they'll never achieve anything and that their life won't matter. He further says, focus on improvement. If you accept mediocrity, then you can always seek to improve. I think because we expect that we're gonna do great things, that we deserve or we are special in some way. But the reality is we're not. We are just always average. The only reason people get above average is because they try to improve on themselves. So by thinking you're average all the time, or at least accepting the fact that you're average, you're constantly forced to improve yourself because you're just average. At least that's the way I've been reframing myself. There is no value in suffering without purpose. I think purpose is something that every human struggles for because we lack the understanding of why we exist in the first place. When we find something that we value, something that we actually care about, we feel a sense of purpose. And this purpose is what makes any situation bearable. For example, let's bring up the investment banking job again. If my purpose was to make as much money as possible, then investment banking, working 60, 70-hour weeks, might actually be bearable because there's a purpose behind it. But for me, making as much money as possible isn't something that I truly care about. So I probably wouldn't be able to bear with the 60, 70-hour weeks. I think we've all heard the quote, it's about the journey, not the destination. And I think we often forget this when we're going through life, that the journey is what makes the beautiful thing, because the journey is what gives you the sense of purpose. Something that Mark also brings up in the book is that struggle is what brings happiness. And I guess that's part of the journey as well. I think struggling for something to reach a certain goal brings you a sense of purpose, and that's why it's so important to find things that you care about, because at the end of the day, it's the struggle that defines who you are. There's one quote that in the book that sums it up really well, is by Sigmund Freud, and Mark uses it, and it's, one day in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. Hey, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, consider giving a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.